What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the LakerCentral pregame show. I'm Alex. That's Vinay. Guys, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the content. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you prefer to listen to your podcast. So, guys, this is our normal pregame show. Nothing new here. You guys
Yes.
are probably used to it by now. But obviously, there was some huge breaking news within the last hour or so. So we're gonna obviously talk about the Lakers, but we're gonna also talk about the Nets and James Harden, uh, and I'm gonna get Vinay's thoughts and get you guys' thoughts as well. So let's just get it out the way. Vinay, what do you think about this whole James Harden to the Brooklyn Nets thing?
I am not surprised. Back in September, I tweeted that the dark horse team that everybody needs to be concerned about that's going to attempt to trade for James Harden, should he decide to, that he wants to leave his situation, was going to be the Nets. And no, I'm not a prophet and I don't have inside sources, but I was right. I know there was a lot of other teams that were speculated that would be interested in him. They were talking about, obviously Philly with the connection to Morey, and them wanting to run a modernized offense. Apparently, Simmons had been part of the conversation. I don't really know how real that is or not, but it sounds like that he was part of the conversation. But in the end, it looks like the Nets, they actually did let go of their young guys. They let go of Karis LeVert. They let go of who am I thinking? Jared Allen, Kurucs, Rodion's Kurucs, a couple of guys out of their depth, and Torian Prince was another guy that they let go. It's a lot of guys on out of their depth that they gave up, and on top of 4 picks and 4 pick swaps, many of them coming after the player option years for those 3 guys that they have now: Harden, Kyrie, and KD. That offense is going to be fantastic. It's going to be really, really great to watch that offense. I don't know what's going to happen with their defense. And, I don't think Nets fans watch us. I imagine it's probably mainly Lakers fans, obviously. But I suspect that their defense that was already a little shaky at the rim and inside the paint is going to get a little more shaky. Now, granted, they can still make a couple more moves. They still have Joe Harris's contract, which can be traded. They still have Dinwiddie, who's out, but it's somebody who wants to just kind of keep him on the shelf for next season. He can be traded too as well. So it's not as if they can't do anything with him. And then they do have some disabled player exceptions and stuff like that to hire guys. But it seems as though they're sort of, I don't know how much of the Kyrie kind of being waffling, whether he's going to play or not, what games he's going to show up for. I don't know if that had a lot to do with them making this move and them not really having transparency. So, it's really 2 ways to look at it. Either this Kyrie thing and him not playing games or taking time off the way that he has is a concern for the Nets because it's going to result in losses on the books for them. Or it's just he was always going to play and they just they've seen enough out of Karis and they've seen enough out of the integration of Karis and Allen and all these other guys. They're like, all right, we got to go for it. And all 3 of their contracts are timed up exactly the same. But, just like last season, it's a long season. We still have 60 games left of basketball for most of these teams. Kyrie's not been healthy for the past couple of years of his career. He's always getting small injuries, which turn into big injuries because of his dynamic style of play. KD has looked great, but we don't know how his body's going to hold up over the course of that many games. Harden, I'm sure he's gonna bounce back. I don't think he'll have any issues, but it's a long season, so I don't know. I don't know what they're going to look like, but just off the bat of just looking at them, their defense is a little bit of a concern because I don't think DeAndre Jordan is got to be a 35-minute rim defender for that team. So, and I don't think you could survive with KD at center because teams are just going and taking layups. Even teams that are not great on offense are going to the rim on that team. So, I'll be curious to see how it all works out. And we haven't even talked about the personalities. We don't know how all that personality fit and clash and all that sort of stuff can happen. So I'll be curious to see how it works.
And I mean, the reason why they did it, in my opinion, is because of the Kyrie stuff. Like, they don't know. Shams and Woj and others have already reported that there's a lack of communication between the Nets and Kyrie. So there's a lack of communication. Kyrie basically took a vacation without telling anybody, and even when he decides to come back, it's not up to the Nets; it's up to the NBA because of the COVID protocols that they're certainly going to put him through. And
Mm-hmm.
while we may expect 10 to 14 days, that's still from whenever he decides to actually say I'm coming back, and the league may say you need to be out longer than 2 weeks. So to me, the Nets are 6-6 right now. They're all in. Like all this nonsense with the Kyrie. If let's say for example he does this again this season, or he just takes as long as he wants, well then what do? You Dinwiddie was
Yep.
out. They were 6-6. They weren't challenging anybody unless Kyrie and KD were both 100% healthy. So now you got
Yep.
Harden in there. Harden, his conference last night, he was upset. That prompted the Rockets to finally pull the trigger on this thing. But they've got 3 stars, and to your point, they're going to be able to put up points. I wouldn't be surprised if they hang 120 or 130 on teams on a consistent basis, on the lower
Yep.
tier teams. But you look at their team, there's a lack of depth. And when you have superstars who are traditionally out, Kevin Durant coming off one of the worst injuries in basketball history. Kyrie,
Mm-hmm.
he never plays a full 82, and this season it's shorter, but he never plays a full season. He already has
Mm-hmm.
missed games, right? Harden is a
Right.
lot more durable than those two guys, but James Harden clearly is looking like Mark Henry, so he's out of shape. So how long does it
Yeah.
take for them to get James Harden's body right? How long does it take to get Kyrie's mind right? And how even though KD's averaging like 29,
Yeah.
you can't expect KD to play all these back to backs and be there the way that he would have been 2 or 3 years ago. So there's so much going on, and then you look at what they gave up, man. Like the pick swaps, all the first round draft picks. Like this reminds me of when Brooklyn went all in a few years ago with Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce.
Right.
Granted, they were older and at the end of their careers, but
Yeah.
when things didn't work out, all their draft picks were gone. So they went like 5 years with not having a way to kind of rebuild that team. And look, as we know, even in a good year, you're one injury away from with the superstar from maybe not making a playoff run or the finals. But now you're dealing with COVID, and now you're
Mm-hmm.
putting 3 superstars together who are extremely combustible. Like KD he walks to the beat of his own drum. Kyrie
Yep.
clearly walks to the beat of his own drum, and Harden just blew up Houston, even though for years Houston had basically did whatever he wanted. And so now, then there's reports that Kyrie didn't want Steve Nash to be the head coach, and he didn't have enough of
Yeah.
an input. So if even when he decides to come back, for right now we don't know if Harden even. I mean, if Kyrie really wanted Harden, but at this point, Brooklyn had to go for it. Like
Yeah.
I mean,
And
as far as I'm concerned, as Lakers fans, I don't care about them until they meet us in the finals. Because just like last year, everyone thought that the Bucks were going to be right there, and what happened?
yeah.
Miami steamrolled them. Same with the Clippers. Denver steamrolled them. So I could care less about what the Nets are doing until they see us in the finals. If they see us in the finals.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've told you before that I try to do is I'm not gonna like the one thing that I'm trying to do this season is not disparage like fans of other teams. Like I don't want to tell Nets fans like, hey, your team that plays no defense. Like, is it a concern for me? For sure, but I'm not gonna like go out of my way to make you feel bad about your team. Like, go ahead, man, root for your team. It's cool.
Yeah.
Lakers will root for ourselves. Like, clearly we have Skip Bayless's attention again because he's mad. He's super horny for the Nets all of a
Yep.
sudden. And so it's like I get it all. I think the most important thing is that like when you look at the history of all these teams, including like the Warriors super team, like you have to have a really really great defense to
Yep.
some degree to be able to win a championship, and that's just an aspect of the game that's not ignored. So there's another part of this that me and you have talked about. It was kind of related to what the Clippers thing was last year with them astroturfing the media and stuff like that, to the degree that they did. A lot of the warts with that team last season were being ignored by the media. I don't know why folks were ignoring it, but obviously, they wanted to have the foil to the Lakers, and so they did that. And I wonder if one of the things that is happening with this Brooklyn situation is because Kyrie's, I mean, to some degree, he is bringing like negative press to the team, right? With like his behavior and stuff like that. And I think like not only is it possible that like not only is it possible that like they made this move from a competitive standpoint, but they need to have winning basketball on the floor. You know what I mean? Like obviously it's great. Katie hits a game winner or a dagger game, the last game and stuff like that. But it's a lot of work. It's not
Yeah.
easy to do that. And you can have all the theatrics on the side if you're winning on the court. As soon as you're not winning on the court, or if you're struggling to win games on the court, and you're supposed to be like a favorite in the East or whatever, like that's when it gets really hard because now the media can't protect you, right? Like, and if you're supposed to be the person that if you're supposed to be the team that usurps big brother in New York, which is the Knicks, no matter how bad they are, brand wise, they're always going to be a tremendous franchise. Like that is like the way that I see it. You know what I mean? Like you can't have bad basketball on the floor, and I think this is them saying, look, we got to get this. Like we got to get this together. We can't be a bad team in the press and be a bad team on the floor. Like so, I'm pretty sure for them, like being 6-6. Granted, Kyrie hasn't played on his own volition. That's not a good look for this team. And I don't think and it's still very early in the season, but 500 like imagine if the Lakers, like we were saying, hey, we should temper our expectations. The Lakers may just play 500 basketball because they're taking it easy because they had a short off season. But Brooklyn doesn't have that excuse. Like they were out way early in the rounds, right? And you've waited 2 years to get this pairing together, so they shouldn't be 6-6. Obviously it makes it worse that the Warriors are pretty good, where Kevin Durant left and he came from and stuff like that. And the fact that Kyrie was the guy who recruited Kevin Durant to Brooklyn, that makes it look even more worse, right? Because the Nets stood by you when even when Durant was hurt and still basically let him sit out the entire first season of his contract in order to do it. So it's, I don't think any of this stuff is like a moratorium, and that's not the direction I'm going in. I don't think it's a moratorium as it relates to like their careers or their legacies and all that sort of stuff. I know a lot of folks are going to be doing that as it relates to them. I don't really care for all that because it's just, in the end, it's basketball. I just like enjoy watching it. But I just think that like I don't think this is just a basketball thing. I think there is a little bit more to that, and I don't know if it's going to get better or if it's going to become more complicated, right? Because Harden's favorite coach of all time is the offensive guy for the Nets, and if Kyrie's thing is, hey, it may be a different guy on every single night, that's not how D'Antoni's offenses work. It's one guy that sets the table for everybody else. So I don't know how that's going to work. I had to like clarify with my tweet. And I was like, I'm not being sarcastic. I genuinely want to know where the leadership comes from this team, because these guys are not leaders in that sort of sense. You know what I mean? So it's like, all right, let's see what happens.
Well, and let's also be clear, as good as Kyrie is, there is a significant gap between Kevin Durant and James Harden and Kyrie Irving. Like two are MVPs and one isn't. I mean, like there's a significant gap. And so if if Harden wanted to go there because one, him and D'Antoni are tighter, they get along, and KD is Kevin Durant, right? Like you're obviously going to acquiesce to what Kevin Durant wants. The odd man out is Kyrie Irving. And so if he did think that it was going to kind of be his comments about, well, we don't really need a head coach, we can kind of all chime in or whatever. And then if he thinks that, well, one night it's going to be KD, one night it's going to be me. Well, look, moving forward, dude, you're the third option. And he had a hard time being in LeBron's shadow. Now, granted, KD and Harden aren't LeBron, but that was still just behind LeBron. You're behind two MVPs at this point. And frankly, Harden might say all the right things when they're allowed to talk about this and do the press conference. Harden isn't taking a backseat to Kyrie Irving, man. He might do it with KD. He's not going to do it. But then I think Mimi or someone in the comments made a good point. But if James couldn't get along with Chris Paul, right? Like, and there's other superstars that he's had issues with. Yeah. He may very well get along with KD because of their past relationship. Yeah. James and Kyrie, I think, are going to bump heads at some point. Like, and I've seen a lot of the New York media basically say, look, tonight the Nets kind of, they won media day, so to speak, because they pulled off this trade. The national media is going to focus on the Nets, but New York media still cares more about the Knicks than the Nets.
Oh yeah.
So I don't even look, man. Look. You have to do it, right? If James Harden is available and Houston is like, we'll take what you got, you pull the trade off because you have no. Plus, he's signed for 3 more years, so you do what you got to do. But I
Yeah.
would not be surprised if Kyrie ends up being the odd man out, and whenever he gets his mind right, the Nets try and unload him to fill out that roster. Because you don't need 3 stars, man, to win a championship. Like you don't need that. That's overkill.
No, I think I mean, yeah, you definitely don't need it. I think the formula has always been, like two clear
Yep.
cut starts, but they have to play on both ends, right? Like you can't have
Yep.
guys that won't, you can't just have two guys that won't play defense, and then having a really, really good roster of um, vets and cohesion and a good coaching staff and a good game plan. But
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost, the most important thing is defense, even
Yep.
more than the stars, I would say, because if you can't defend, you're not going anywhere. We've seen tons of teams good with two quality stars not
Yep.
get anywhere. Harden's seen it. Durant has seen it when he was with OKC without Harden. We saw it with Kawhi and Paul George. Like, if you're not engaged on both ends, if you're two most important guys, and if they're not inclusive, um, they're in the sense that they keep role players engaged and accountable, and they keep themselves
Mm-hmm.
accountable. It just doesn't happen. The coach doesn't do that for you. It has to be with the play that's on the floor. So it'll be very interesting to see how this situation manages itself out. I think they have a good shot because of the strength of their offense. They have a good shot to roll a lot of teams that are in the Eastern Conference. But in the playoffs, when people are really, really trying to pick apart your offense
Yep.
and find the weaknesses, that's kind of where it'll be. And we know that this team is not going to be the final version. This is not the final version of their team. I'm
No.
like they need a backup center. They have that young guy Nick Claxton, but I don't think they expect the 21-year-old to step in and like be ready to like be a rim enforcer and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So that's really all. That's really all the thoughts that I have on the Nets. Like, it, I don't know if it's combustible parts, but it seems like some of these parts are combustible if the right mix is sort of there. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure, and it may not be combustible. I think one of the things that happens with sometimes with these athletes is they don't combust; they just disengage, and that's even worse because when
Mm-hmm.
you're disengaged from your team, nobody knows. Like we saw that with Harden and the Rockets. Like you can see what sort of animosity it breeds within your teammates because your
Yep.
teammates know you're not engaged, right?
Yep.
Like Wall and Cousins' comments today after Harden's comments yesterday, like they basically clearly they didn't say anything because they didn't want to jeopardize Harden's trade value or whatever it was, and they were being good teammates. But Boogie straight up came out and said, "Oh, the disrespect started before the season even started
Yep.
when Harden decided not to show up for training camp and stuff like that." So it's we'll see how it goes. Well, Harden got what he wanted, and so we're gonna have to wait and see how this all sort of works out, and if he's gonna buy in, and how these different, and we'll have to wait and see if when Kyrie comes back, and how long his break is gonna have to be. So it'll be good. They'll put wins on the board, but I think there's still some work to do with that roster to make it a little bit more defensively sound. Uh, but that's enough of Nets talk because there's really nothing to care about when it comes to them until the playoffs actually start. We've got a game against OKC, and the best news, the second best news, or no, sorry, the best news for Laker fans today that I read was that Anthony Davis and LeBron James are playing today in a back
Mm-hmm.
to back. They're both playing. Probably bodes well that we blew out Houston and completely, changed the course of history for their franchise after the win yesterday.
Yep.
But it's also good that both of our stars are playing back to backs. And I believe the only thing I've seen for OKC is that Al Horford's not playing. So should be a very interesting game with them not having him. They may do a lot of that 4 guard rotation stuff for that 3
Mm-hmm.
guards and a smaller forward situation. So we may get some small ball today, which means more minutes for Taylor Horton Tucker and Caruso and all those guys. So I'm looking forward to this game because OKC doesn't have, like, outside of maybe Shea Gilgeous, they don't have that like clear cut guy,
Mm-hmm.
like that you can zone in on. And I think it's a good test for the Lakers defense because it'll force them to have to be on top of their game for the whole team and not just a couple of guys.
I mean, look, they blew out the Rockets in back-to-back games, and I'm curious to see how they do now with the back-to-back with, the Thunder. Thunder are in ninth place, I think, in the West. They are not. I don't think they're having as good a season as they did last year. But all the guys aren't there, right? So it's a bit of a different roster. I think it's good that the Lakers blew out the Nets the other night because now guys didn't have to play over 30 minutes. They can come into tonight hopefully a little bit fresher. Wes is going to be out. He's still dealing with that Achilles soreness. But AD,
Hmm.
who stubbed his toe, thank God X-rays were negative and there were no issues,
Yeah.
and he's going to go. And I just want to say, man, all the talk about Anthony Davis being fragile those years in New Orleans, I hope that he has deaded that talk ever since he got to LA, because that's clearly not the case. The dude gives it a go. Really, when he could have sat out tonight. There's really no reason for him to play, but they're going to
Hmm.
go for it. And I want to see if they bring the same energy they brought against Houston. Like, do they let their
Yeah.
guard down, kind of like they did against Chicago, and let that game be way too close? Or do they come out and send another message and just say, "Hey, we're better than everybody else"? So I do want to see how they look tonight. I want to. So I talked about this on Twitter a little bit, but like, Kuz having those 11 rebounds the other night. Like, I'm looking to see if he has another performance like that. Not like leading the team in rebounding, but
Right.
just other things. And he's done a better job this year of doing other things. And he torched the Thunder. What was it, last year when AD sat out? I think
Yeah,
he
he
dropped
did.
30 on him or whatever. So
Yeah.
I'm looking to see what some of these other guys do, like him, Schroeder, Trez, even THT, Caruso.
Hmm.
I don't want to see LeBron and Anthony Davis play more than 30 minutes tonight. Blow this team out, get a 10 or 15 point lead early, and coast to a victory.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that game in OKC was actually without LeBron and without Anthony Davis. It was, I think, Rondo and Kuzma were the
Mm-hmm.
ones that were like extraordinary. And obviously now we've got Dennis Schroeder, so it would be nice if we got a repeat effort. I would say since it is a back to back, I would imagine, and since it was Vogel kept everybody's minutes down,
Yep.
he spread out pretty evenly. It would be nice to see a blowout. I think OKC is a little competitive, so they won't. They may go down by 20 if they go through like a cold shooting streak or the Lakers playing really, really great defense. But I would imagine they'll keep trying to battle back. They won't just kind of punt it away the way Houston probably did yesterday. What I'm actually very curious to see is how THT bounces back. The last game he didn't have a very good game. I wouldn't say it was average. I would say it was like right under that. He was making some basic mistakes that you would expect basically a rookie guy to make and stuff like that. So I understand that. But Houston presents an offense, or sorry, presents an offense that involves a lot of guards. A lot of wing play, a lot of guard play. So THC won't get any real advantages against like mismatches and stuff like that. So he's going to be defended by guys that are like of his age
Mm-hmm.
group and of his skill set. I'm curious to see how he does against those kind of guys, because that's really the test that we want to see. Like, how does THT do against Darius Baisley, or how does THT do against Lou Dort if he gets matched up on him or something like that? You know what I mean?
Right.
So those are the kind of guys that we want to see. I think this will be a nice. I think this will be like a nice. How tough are you really? How seriously do you take your opponents on a nightly basis, sort of thing? And I would say the unwritten motivation for this game may be the fact that all of Twitter is ablaze about this Nets kind of stuff that's going on. So
Yeah.
I wonder if this Lakers team has seen the Skip Bayless tweets and all these other tweets that everybody are putting out. Nets have a super team, and Nets are the team to beat, and Nets look really, really great. And I wonder if that's enough motivation for them to go out and send a message to the rest of the league with their play tonight. And if they put up an as dominant or even more dominant performance than they did against the Rockets, uh, I'm for sure going to be under the belief that maybe they're using that as a little bit of a motivation for themselves. A lot of people aren't really talking about the Clippers. Like, they're
Nope.
a good team, but they're not talking about them as like the foil to the Lakers season. Even though some people do expect them to go to the Western Conference Finals. Nobody in the West is really being touted that way. But now with the Nets, you may have like a real contender in terms of like, hey, this team could definitely beat the Lakers if they meet each other in the finals. And then people were already kind of supporting the Nets in that capacity too, to some degree. So now with three very clear-cut all-star players on that team, I wonder if the Lakers now have like that chip, that chip and motivation on their shoulder, not only just for our superstars, but for
Mm-hmm.
guys like Dennis Schroeder and Montrez and Wes Matthews. These are guys that are hyper competitive defensive guys. I'm curious to see if they play with a chip on their shoulder tonight and send a message and try to run OKC out of their own gym.
I mean, I was thinking that like this year, the media has been pretty quiet in regards to the Bucks, the Clippers, and anybody else
Mm-hmm.
really. No Boston talk, no Heat talk. But now, at least for the next few days, there's going to be a whole lot of Brooklyn talk. And so we're seeing it with Skip, who we know is really just trolling. But there's going to be a lot of
Yeah.
national, big name people that have millions of followers and have big audiences. They're going to say, oh, no, you better watch out for the Nets, or KD's better than LeBron or whatever.
Right.
And they may very well come out tonight and just crush the Thunder. I mean, I hope they do. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but they know. Like, it's the same way when Kyrie made those comments about looking down into the bench and have another guy to get a shot or whatever. LeBron's people are sending him content left and right, probably. Hey, did you hear this? Of course, someone like LeBron, he doesn't need bulletin board material, but these guys, they do use those things. They do, he knows that he's still the best player in the world. Anthony Davis knows that he's one of the best players in the world. What they're going for, they're chasing history. Like, teams don't repeat very often, so they're not going to look too far ahead and think about Brooklyn or anything. But I wouldn't be surprised if they came out tonight. Like, even last night against Houston, the fun that they were having, like LeBron shooting that three and turning around, they were having fun last night. And so if they get up a little bit on the Thunder, I'm looking for a Mike Tyson like knockout early in the game, man, and they just blow them out.
Yeah, I feel like the energy of the team has been pretty positive, especially with these last two games. And I would imagine that they're going to try and continue that sort of thing. It's a good vibe to have. Schroeder has also looked really good. All the role players have looked really good and kind of really into the game and stuff like that. So it's just kind of hoping that we can continue to build that chemistry. Lakers had a lot of different kinds of looks that they did, but it all started on the defensive end.
Right.
So even though OKC doesn't necessarily have the star power as some of the other teams that we played, they are a good team. They're a competitive team, as you would expect from a young team as it is. But I would like to see the Lakers come out, at least because we've got the vets and the older guys and stuff like that, to come out dominating. I'll be curious to see if they put like Lou Dort or something like that on LeBron early. I'm not quite sure if he's that primary big defender, so I'll have to check. But the matchup should be really interesting. It would have been nice to see if Al Horford, what he looked like against what he would look like against Anthony Davis. It would have been a nice test, but with him not playing, I think they're kind of thin down low. So I don't really know what to expect out of them. They're also supposedly supposed to be tanking for a top pick, but then they're winning games. So yeah, they're like 5-5. So it's just like I'm not quite. You guys aren't doing a very good job of tanking if that's your goal. But yeah, I'm looking at the depth chart right now, assuming that this is accurate on ESPN. Looks like they've got Shai Gilgeous. They're starting George Hill. Dort is playing the 3, so he would technically match up with LeBron. And then they've got Basley playing the 4. So that's basically like 4 wing guys, more or less. Shai Gilgeous is a bigger guard, so I would be curious to see if we put KCP on him instead of Schroeder, because KCP is bigger than Schroeder, and Schroeder probably matches up a little bit better with George Hill. And then we'll just see. It looks like their depth chart has Mike Muscala, former Laker, a very short period of time. As their backup center. I don't know if he actually is, or I think I've seen this other kid, Isaiah Roby. Like they played him a little bit more at center. So, like I said, a young team, maybe outside of George Hill and Shai Gilgeous, not guys that you would like look at and be like, wow, these guys are outstanding offensive players. So if the Lakers come out playing really sharp on defense, this could turn into a blowout very, very quickly against OKC. And then that's when we'll start going into the territory of what's it called? Like, are they trying to send a message to the rest of the league on the heels of the trade and stuff like that? So it should be really interesting to see how this team responds. But they've been good on the road, so I can't really complain.
They're undefeated, I believe, on the road.
Yeah, they're undefeated on the road. So not much to complain about with this team. And I hope LeBron continues his like MVP caliber like start to this season, and I hope Anthony Davis collects 3 or 4 blocks for himself so he can catch up to whoever the block leader is in the NBA. I think it's Miles Turner, or maybe I think Gobert is above him, or it's Miles Turner, then Gobert, and then Anthony Davis. But hopefully he can stack up some more of those blocks and steals and stuff like that he's been doing.
Yeah, it's funny about the blocks things because I just saw a comment a little while. So Daniel, we get this a lot when we're doing these. Deadman as an example, like this, people still want kind of a more athletic big. And guys, like, just so you're aware, the Lakers are 3rd in the NBA in blocks right now. Anthony Davis and Marc Gasol are league leaders in blocks. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know we love the high flying, block something out into the rafters or whatever, out to the bleachers, but like this team's defense is really good. They're I think they're number three in defense this year so far, number two in net rating. But anyway, their defense is really good, guys, and so look, Dedmon's available for a reason. If the Lakers wanted Dedmon, they would certainly have had conversations and maybe already brought him in. The Lakers, I think, are going to wait until the buyout market, which is the smart thing to do. That's when
Yeah.
contracts are prorated. That's when you're going to see kind of that upper echelon, veteran guy that might get bought out because teams are tanking at that point, and the Lakers could get somebody on the cheap. At this point, they're just too good to waste a roster spot on anybody. And even cutting someone like Quinn Cook, they're not going to do that. Quinn's good for the locker room. They like him a lot. And he's a hard worker. Yeah. They're not going to do anything right now just because they want to, fans want them to bring in a more athletic big. And even someone like Dedmon, I don't even know what he would really provide at this point. Like I don't know.
Yeah, the difficult part of judging a defense, I think we've talked about, not exactly in this manner, but we've mentioned in a few different ways, that when we think about like the depth, or not the depth, the quality of defense, there's two ways of doing it, right? Last season, we had a lot of situations where we had to corral players or we had to guide offensive players to our bigs, two guys like JaVale McKee and Dwight Howard. So our point of attack defense in slowing guys down wasn't as good as it could have been. But because we had these two behemoths that were just blocking shots, the way that we thought of our defense was either stop them on the perimeter or send them to our bigs. Mm-hmm. So that emphasis on the Lakers bigs was much higher because we were sending people to them because we knew that Dwight could block somebody or he could absorb a collision without fouling. Same thing with JaVale. JaVale would use his length to block layup attempts and stuff like that from weird angles. But this season, what the Lakers have done a better job of is helping each other when people do try to attack the lane. And what's happening is those straight line drives that we normally used to see that the Lakers give up sometimes to, that Dwight or JaVale will clean up, those aren't really straight line drives anymore. What's happening is that players are having to pick up the ball a little bit early and make kick out passes. We saw that with Harden the other day, just this last game. How many times did Harden have to go? There's a couple of times where he got to the rim and AD blocked his shot. But how many times did Harden get to the rim only to be met with multiple guys because they know their rotations, or somebody swipes at the ball or pokes at the ball or something like that, slowing him down enough where it's very difficult for him to get a shot up. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the identity of this defense. They've gone away from being a team that's going to try and meet you at the summit of the mountain when you go for your shots, and instead they're turning into a team that's going to like death by 1,000 cuts you all the way to the rim. So they'll poke the ball, they'll swipe at your hands, they'll try and cause turnovers all the way up until that point. And in the end, if all else fails, we still have a guy like Gasol who can absorb collisions without fouling, who has really great hands. Or we also have what's it called? Obviously Anthony Davis that we can rely on. Even Montrez as a help defender is pretty good. So that's the way I would think of it. Team defense is always about multiple points of failure and having good, strong points of contention. And the Lakers are still a very good defensive team, but they're a good defensive team in a different way. Instead of prioritizing size, they prioritize speed. And that's the best way I can kind of describe it, without actually pulling up video and tape and trying to show you guys. And it's not just speed; it's also like IQ. We just have smarter defense, and a team that's analytically inclined, even though Harden kind of checked out, like Houston, still should have been able to get a lot of open shots because they space the floor out and stuff like that. That's just genuinely how it works. Same thing for Dallas, but the Lakers obliterated both of those teams, and they run the same exact type of offense, 5 out. And so that's the thing that I would think it's the same result on the defensive end, just a different way. That's all it is. The method is a little bit different, and that's why they've been good.
No, the Lakers, so far they've done everything right. I mean, I don't think there's any reason to complain about the way they're going about this season at this point. And I think that even the way that they're defending, the way that they're generating offense, I think the guys like Schroeder has been much better on defense than any of us could have predicted. Obviously, THT has been better than any of us thought. And I think some of the things we got last season out of guys like Bradley, you're getting out of Caruso, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the team is fine. And I want to take a moment and give some love to KCP, man, because I want to try to do that
Yeah.
more often because he caught it. You know, Lakers fans were pretty brutal with him for a few years, but his
Yeah.
workman-like mentality, like he reminds me of in the early 2000s when the Lakers had guys like Ron Harper or Rick Fox, like
Yeah.
especially like Rick Fox, like you just knew, you know, hit the open jumper, play defense. He wasn't afraid to mix it up, and KCP really doesn't. He doesn't have to mix it up. His personality doesn't seem to be that, but you just know what you're going to get now, night in and night out. And when he misses a few shots, he doesn't get down. Like when he hits a few shots, he doesn't get super excited. He just his
Mm-hmm.
workman like mentality is so nuts right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he deserves a lot of kudos, man, because obviously it was him coming here a few years ago that opened the door to us having some conversations with Rich Paul, which ultimately led to us having a window into LeBron.
Yep.
But KC might have been the third. KCP might have been the third best player in that finals run last season, and this season he's just been ultra consistent, man. So I wanted to take a moment and just give that dude a ton of love.
Yeah, I would say that he's probably become, he went from this guy is stealing money to like a, like I would say that with like we practically expect him to make threes now just because of how good he's
Mm-hmm.
been. And I think the best part of just kind of what he does is he just kind of obviously he has his personality and stuff like that, but I think the best part to see about him is like his confidence, like that championship confidence and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
that he has. That like, oh wow, like this is what it's like to win a championship. And
Yep.
the weird, not the weird thing, but like the cool thing is like I wonder if like the game has gotten easier for him, because like this will be the same coach, same philosophy, same system,
Mm-hmm.
just upgraded parts to the system, and so I think that kind of stuff is cool. I think the part that's probably been understated is that the IQ of this team is really, really good. Like Laker fans have talked about it, but it's really surprising that the general media hasn't mentioned anything at all about it. Like this team, even if it's not like, even if certain players like Gasol aren't as athletically inclined as like a guy like
Mm-hmm.
Dwight and JaVale and stuff like that, like this team is very smart and it knows how to attack you and it knows how to do what it does. Um, and I think that only gets better as the season progresses. So there's a version of this team where like these guys are like literally all on the same page, not only on defense but on the offensive end too as well. And it's very, very hard to figure out what their sets are. They don't have to call them out because the guys know what they're going to run against what they see on the defensive end. So it's it is a very interesting place to be as a fan to see this team because it's not that like they're on autopilot, but it
Mm-hmm.
almost feels like they are when they're running going through their motions and stuff like that. And this is probably like I always say that LeBron's body language is always a good indicator of letting
Yep.
us know like kind of where everybody what the pulse of the team is. Um, I think LeBron's body language has been unpressed, very relaxed this entire
Oh yeah.
season, and I think that's a good sign for this team. It shows probably the level of confidence. We know he's one of the best evaluators of
Mm-hmm.
like a team and of players that are on a team, and um, I think his body language is representative of the mood of the entire team.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when we weren't playing defense, Anthony Davis was mad about that.
Right.
But now we're playing defense because we're all locked in and we want to be serious about it. But I think that's good. I think seeing that sort of body language and these guys not being stressed out. And look, if the Lakers if the Lakers end up having a really, really good record and it's like getting towards the end of the season and the NBA announces, hey, we're going to go back to the bubble format for the playoffs or something like that, and whether there's fans or not, or whatever it is, or if everything goes back to normal and all of a sudden now
Mm-hmm.
we can have fans and now the Lakers have home court advantage all the way through the playoffs or something, through the finals or whatever, like the Lakers will have the luxury to be able to dictate that sort of thing for themselves.
Yep.
And I would hope that by the time maybe the finals playoffs come around, we're able to go and watch some of these games in LA. For me, at least in LA, at Staples. But or sorry. So if it does, that'll be awesome because what they've been waiting for, motivation wise, is is fans. Like they keep saying that they need it's awesome when they have fans, and I don't know if they're gonna have fans in OKC or if OKC allows fans in there, but um, it's a good sign for this team. And I will say one more thing about it. LeBron seems like he's like practicing his shots, like the mid range stuff that he was doing last game. I was just like, all right, I've never seen him take this much mid range in a regular season game unless there's like high stakes involved, like it's a late,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like it's the end of the game sort of moment and stuff like that. And he was just like taking them, like just casually taking those fades and stuff like that. So it's like the worst thing you could probably do is allow him to get like a 60 game tune up of his jump shooting going into the playoffs. We saw what that did for what's it called? We saw what that did for Anthony Davis. So it would be hilarious to see LeBron just turn into like this dynamic jump shooter because teams are like, all right, this is how we're going to play defense. We're just going to let you do whatever you want. So it'll be interesting to see.
Well, he's comfortable this year. And so there's two things I want to bring up. I want to get to OKC starting lineup. We just got it. Thanks, Michelle, for sending that to us. But, Harrison Fagan, I guess he had talked to Kyle Kuzma. Kuzma said that the Lakers, they have incentive to follow the health and safety protocols this season. And he said specifically no one wants to mess it up. Like, no one wants to mess up the Lakers' chance of potentially repeating because they were out partying or they got sick and they infected another player or a staff member or coach or whatever. Right. The Lakers are business. They are taking this. It's such a business approach that I love how they've handled this. I love the fact that they're working together as a team and as a family. From top down, that organization is doing everything they need to do. But also, let me bring in what the starting lineup for OKC is going to be. Thanks, Michelle, for this. So she said really small lineup. Shea Gillis, Dort, Hill, Baisley, and Isaiah Roby. I mean, so what do you think? You think the Lakers, they probably start the same regular lineup, but do you think this changes the rotation up any?
No, I don't think it'll change the rotation up. It may change up the way the bench substitution pattern happens in case OKC continues to do the 3-guard thing. So the Lakers may have to go small. That doesn't mean that Anthony Davis can play the 5. It just means that maybe more minutes for Montrez and stuff like that, or whatever it may be. And so this lineup is not an offensively imposing. Now, I haven't watched OKC games, so I don't know how good they've been on the offensive end. But this lineup is not a very offensively imposing lineup, at least when we look at the names. I know Shai Gilgeous is very good. Hill you shouldn't discount that. He's a good vet, stuff like that. I think Dort's actually shooting like 40% from 3, but I don't think they've played a defense maybe like the Lakers and stuff like that, so I'll be curious to see what that looks like. But what I do see with this team is it's a bunch of athletes.
Yep.
It's a bunch of guys that'll get up and down the court, and they're going to increase the pace of the game. One of the things that we haven't seen with the Lakers, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't think we've really seen with the Lakers. Maybe outside of maybe the Dallas and Minnesota games, not too many teams try to get into a transition game with the Lakers because when you do that, usually the Lakers get, they'll poke the ball away, they'll generate turnovers, blocks, and stuff like that, and that's when stuff really goes downhill for opposing teams. So if this team is going to try and run a smaller lineup with the hopes of speeding the game up, that may not work out the way that they think, or it may. Who knows? Depends on what version of the Lakers we get tonight. But obviously, I expect it to be very good. So I don't know, Matt. That you look at that lineup and then you look at their depth chart and you think to yourself, all right, maybe this team could end up getting blown out. Maybe the Lakers do get an opportunity to send a message to the rest of the league, even after the James Harden trade, to let them know that, oh yeah, we saw the trade, but we're not worried about it. And so, I would hope that they put on a really, really great defensive performance too as well. They won't take them lightly, and they'll put they'll put a serious effort towards this sort of situation. I'm reading some of the questions that we have in here. A lot of folks are saying in the chat, they're mentioning stuff like, Bron's going to be fresh come playoff time. I think you put that up there. He's preserving himself. I think you guys are all right. I think the reason why Anthony Davis, actually last game, he was going to the rim a little bit more, very, very close painted shots out of isolation. It almost looked like he was practicing over PJ Tucker. It didn't even seem like he was very impressed by PJ Tucker. Obviously, Tucker wants out of Houston too as well.
Yep.
You're right. Shazeb, like it doesn't look like Bron and AD are going too crazy attacking the rim. So it sounds like they're preserving their bodies. And on top of that, not only are they preserving their bodies, they're probably like getting back into like jump shooting shape and stuff like that. So it's like they're able to get live practice, trying out stuff that they wanted to try out in the regular season against like a live defense and stuff like that. So it's good stuff. I'd expect a dominant performance out of the Lakers tonight. I think they want to try to keep that road record undefeated. But we'll see if they have a little bit extra that they want to in this matchup tonight because of the news, all the news and the excitement around the Nets.
They just might. And I mean, the good thing about LeBron and Anthony Davis is we know that they're going to be ready come playoff time. I think right now, not forcing anything, kind of letting the game just evolve as it does over the course of the season. It's also building confidence up for those other guys, right? Like your KCPs, like your Trez, your Schroeders, even THT and Caruso. Like, it's letting those guys get in their rhythm and find what works best for them. And then this team's gonna be ready, man. Like, I recognize that Brooklyn, they just added an MVP to their team. The Bucks are still really good. The Clippers obviously want to be good this year. The Heat, all these teams are gonna be. We might have to go through some version of all these different teams, but the Lakers seem like they found a winning formula. Like, from the front office, the coaching staff, to the guys on the court. It seems like they just know what they need to do. And I think winning that championship last year probably took a ton of pressure off the organization because of how bad we were over the last, handful of years. And then just all the things that was happening around the Lakers. Like, there's just no drama around this team. Like, the media doesn't really even talk about the Lakers, which is crazy that the team would be, best record in NBA and have LeBron on it, and the media is virtually silent day in and day out about the Lakers.
That's the crazy part. Last season, all we heard all the time were all the different ways the Lakers wouldn't be a successful team in the season, and this season it's like completely quiet. And some people almost begrudgingly saying like, "Yeah, nobody's going to beat this team. Like, this team is going to go back to the finals in the Western Conference." And so, obviously health and stuff like that, the COVID protocol and stuff like that is all important too as well. And they have to be prepared for whatever the situation may be. But, the money thing is not an issue. Obviously, Schroeder's probably one of the biggest guys that we're waiting on, but we can't do anything until February. But it sounds like the conversations are good.
And he just said again, I think he reiterated last night or today, he wants to come back. So
yeah. And I think he paid a very heavy compliment where he said that, like, he's like, this is the first time where I played on a team where people are having fun and being professionals, like, at the same time. So it's like do your job, but enjoy doing your job, because that also matters as well, like the people you play with and the quality of play on the floor and stuff like that. So I think that's a testament for a guy who just came to this team and has only played 10 games with us or whatever, that somebody brand new to this team is coming in and saying that. Obviously, Montrez has relationships via Clutch to Anthony Davis and LeBron, so expect him to be positive. I mean, he seems like a nice guy in general. But, the newest guy, right, the guy with no connections pretty much whatsoever to the Lakers, is Schroeder. And for him to pay that sort of compliment to the franchise, that's pretty awesome. So, it's nothing to complain about so far. Everybody has small things that they can improve upon as the course of the season, so we're always going to talk about stuff like that. I would say I'll just be watching, man. Will our role players continue to play excellently? And they've been great so far. They have some games that they're up and down, but that's normal. That's what makes them role players. So I'll be rooting for all those guys to continue to find some rhythm. And that bench lineup, what's it called? Vogel got very bold last game, and he went straight with the AD non-Braun lineup, and that they actually held the lead and extended it like by I think 2 points or 3 points for a long stretch of that Houston game. I wonder if that happens again, because that's a pretty good sign of a really good team if you can bench both of your superstars, and they're playing against starters on the other team, and your bench is, like or a lineup composing of most of your bench players is able to preserve a lead. Like, that's completely different from what we had last season. So that's like the real main trend that I'll probably be watching.
I love the fact that this quote is making the rounds again, but it wasn't that long ago. KD said the environment around LeBron in Los Angeles was toxic, and now you've got guys like Schroeder wanting to stay in Los Angeles with the Lakers. So I love that things have flipped. But Nate, I want to close the show with these two questions, because we got asked these two, and it doesn't have a lot to do with the Lakers. But let's close the show on something different. The first question, Alex and Vinay,
All
top
right.
5 players in NBA order. You want to go first, Vinay? You want me to go?
Yeah, you can go first.
Jeez. Well, look, LeBron and Anthony Davis, 1 and 2. And then I'm going to go. Look, LeBron and Anthony Davis, 1, 2. Then I'm going to go Giannis. Then I'm going to go Kawhi. And I would normally go KD in the top 5, but I need to see a full healthy season from him. So top 5. Oh, who's number 5?
I mean,
As
you
of
could probably put KD or Embiid,
I was
maybe, or
gonna say
Jokic.
Embiid or Jokic, so I'd say
Yeah.
today, right now, I'd say 5 is a tie between Embiid and Jokic.
Okay. So assuming everybody's healthy, I would say my top five is LeBron at one. I'm not going to put Anthony Davis at two. I'm actually going to put Steph Curry at two
Wait,
because
wait, wait,
I
wait,
think he
wait.
is a very good. I think he is a very good leader. And I think, like LeBron, he doesn't obviously have the same intangibles. The accolades don't match up.
hmm
The statistics don't match up. Just in terms of like impact and like a
Sure,
guy,
sure.
when he's on the floor, he tries to get the best out of his teammates. I would put Steph at two.
hmm
At three is where I would put Anthony Davis. Yes, that is above Kawhi. That would be above KD. At four, I would put KD. And I would say at five, I'd probably put Embiid. But I'll tell you what, the number one spot for sure, like because it's a top five question.
hmm
I don't like ranking players because
Right.
I don't think
Yeah.
it's correct. But if I had to put a tier, okay, if I had to put a tier of players, I would say LeBron is in his own tier, and those other four guys are whatever the tier is after that. So if that makes the folks that are Bron fans in the chat feel better, there is a very clear gap between Bron's tier and everybody else when it comes to it, and that tier can always change. You know, like
Right.
it could be Kawhi for a certain stretch. You know, Paul George has had a really good start, but obviously we're not measuring him based on his regular season. So like stuff like that. So I would say that those are probably the guys that I look at where I say, okay, if I put these guys on other teams, would they be as successful? And I think they would be. And those are the guys, but not just successful because of their basketball play, but successful as like leaders. I think
Right.
Anthony Davis has made strides as a leader to warrant being in a top five conversation, if that makes sense. So I think like Steph, KD, Anthony Davis, and then who would I say, Embiid, like those guys can be leaders for their teams and
hmm
will willingly take those roles and then also match with their production.
Right.
Braun is always going to be in a tier of his own because you've just never seen anything like him, and we may never see anything like him ever again. And so that's why I put him that way.
Let's close with this last question. Vinay, who's your favorite player or players not on the Lakers?
My favorite player that's not on the Lakers. Let me think. Let me think. Who do I like that's not on the Lakers? That is a tough question to pick one person that I really like. I think the one player I really, really like that is not on the Lakers is Bradley Beal on the Wizards.
Hmm.
I think he is a much better combination guard than people realize. And, whether it's Washington's fault or whoever's fault it is, I'd say Brad is probably one of the guys that I look at and I go, wow, this guy in the right situation could be really, really good.
hmm
And he just hasn't been part of a great organization. Um, so I'd say Brad, but I will say one of the other guys that I've always been a very, very big fan of, because he's from LA area, is Westbrook. Like everything about Westbrook, I love. I love the way that he impacts the game. I know he's not a great closer. I know he's like a boneheaded guy sometimes at times, but Russ is a guy that I really, really like. And growing up watching Kobe and stuff like that, and the
hmm
ferocity he played with, Russ reminds me a lot of that kind of mentality, and so I like him too. But I'd say Brad, like I like two guards that can kind of do a whole bunch of different stuff, and I feel like Brad can do a lot. He's just in a really, really tough situation.
I'd say mine is Steph Curry, and
Sure.
I had to really think about it, but it's Steph. Like if you would have asked me 20 years ago, it would have been Kobe on the Lakers and then like AI off the Lakers. But today.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Steph. So when Steph was kind of like going on his rise and he won his MVPs and got his championships, like there was a year, at least one of those years, I said Steph was better than LeBron. Like he changed the game of basketball, and he did it in a way where he wasn't physically intimidating. Where typically we see these guys, whether it's Kobe, whether it's LeBron, Shaq, Jordan, these guys have so much physicality to their games and skill as well, but they're just they can jump out the gym, they can do things that most people can't.
I'm
Now,
tampering.
now
No, I was
Steph,
reading what the chat said. Somebody saying I was tampering. Michelle was saying I was tampering. I was like,
am
I?
Yeah, but Beal. But like, is that like if I don't really watch very many other teams, but when Golden State was Golden State, even before they got KD, Steph was doing things I never saw anybody just pull up from a step inside the
Right.
half court line and just knock down threes like it was nothing. So, Steph, I hope Steph, I don't want to see his career go out where those guys are struggling to win games. I don't like to see the greatest players of all time go out like that. But Steph would be my guy. So, guys, thanks for that question or those questions. You guys are sending more in, but we're getting close to game time because the game's going to tip off in a few minutes. So.
Yes, sir.
We're gonna get out of here, guys, and I think we'll be back for the post game tonight. Let's hope the Lakers blow out the Thunder, and we'll go from there, guys. As always, thank you guys so much. I got another notification that you guys had well over 100 comments in the chat. Thank you guys for keeping it going. Mimi, Michelle, Adrian, all you guys that are out there that are in these chats, man. You guys do a great job at just having a casual conversation while me, Vinay, and I are doing our thing, talking about the Lakers. So we appreciate you guys' interaction. Thank you for the questions. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Turn on notifications. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever. And check us out on Twitter. You see our screen names on Twitter. And we'll be back for the post game, guys. So enjoy the game. We're out.